In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be analyzing the win against Sampdoria. We'll be previewing the games against Sassuolo and Parma, interview with Serie A commentator Patrick Kendrick, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on SempreInter.com.
Per De Vrij, c'è la torre per Messina, l'ha presa! L'ha ripresa Messina! L'ha ripresa Messina! Il Toro! Il Toro! Il Toro! Il tiro! Samir! Bandanovic! La recupera Brozovic, andiamo in contropiede, la porta è vuota, tira, attenzione, e gol, e gol!
Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. They're coming fast and furious in between because the games are we're playing games every 3 days. So hang on to your hats and let's go. I'm joined today by the preview writer for SempreInter.com, Mr. Mohamed Nasser. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing as well.
Sounds good. We're going to get into why we're doing well and why all Interisti should be doing well. Although I'm not. I'm going to be the crank. I'm going to be the Moggi to your Moratti this week. And we're all the way from Florida, Mr. Alex Dono. How are you doing, man? Good to have you on.
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be back. It's been a minute since I've spoken to you all, so thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it is. And it's good to have you on. And we're also joined by our good friend, Mr. William Beckman.
Good evening. I've had an incredibly lazy day, so I'm going to pretend that I've been saving my energy for this podcast. So let's get on with it.
That's good. And we're also joined by our good friend, Serie A commentator. He did the cup final when Napoli won against Juventus. And he's worked for Inter TV. He's worked for Benfica TV. He also has the sexiest Portuguese accent you can imagine. Welcome back, Mr. Patrick Kendrick.
Hello, everyone. Great to be back. Lovely to talk about the Nerazzurri.
Oh, it's always nice to have you. Right, let's get right to it then. You did the cup final. You stayed a couple of extra days in Naples to watch all the madness and celebrations go on. How was that? I mean, how was the city? How was everything?
Well, I hate to be a bit of a killjoy, but I took a train from Naples up to Milan, did the cup final off tube. I'm sort of killing the magic here of sports broadcasting, but I'd love to say I went to Rome, but I think there wasn't much space for me given the ample bulk of Mr. Silvestre after he bellowed the national anthem. No, all things. I went up to Milan, did the cup final, then went back down to Naples. So I actually missed all of the congregation at Afragola, which is probably the most action Afragola has ever seen. I mean, most of the time you get down on the train to Naples from Milan, it's the best part of 5 hours, and you're cursing as it trundles into Afragola, and there's no point in being there. But so I think there's going to be possibly a spike in new cases of COVID-19. It's just so Neapolitan, to be honest, because when I was down there, it was 3 or 4 days with 0 new cases, and Campania was all very tranquil for once, and people were getting back to normality. And then Napoli go and win the Coppa Italia, and things all get a little bit silly. People jumping off and knocking people off their scooters and stealing all sorts, and projectiles and rogue missiles and all that sort of things. And it's just a shame because I'm a big fan of that city, and then 2 or 3 idiots just go and make all these headlines there. But no, a good final, all things considered. I'm just sorry that I managed to miss the celebrations. Then again, my girlfriend's family, they limited themselves to just sort of banging pots and pans out of the window, because they're a little bit worried about COVID-19. So that probably would have been advisable, I think, for everyone that was celebrating that way. But, the Coppa Italia has clearly become big time in the last few years, especially when you haven't won a league title in over 30 years and you've only ever won a couple in your history. So, yeah, understandable, to be honest.
That's true. I mean, I was watching at the celebratory photos, and there's not a lot of social distancing going on there. People in fountains and stuff. But we'll just let's hope it all went well. Let's talk about Inter. I mean, we were kind of divided last week on the show about Inter's performance against Napoli, and then then Inter go against Sampdoria and divide us again, because it seems that Inter's Conte has a problem to understand that a game of football is 2 times 45 minutes and not 1 times 45 minutes. We've seen it against Borussia Dortmund. We saw it to some extent against Barcelona. We saw it against Milan. The first half was awful. The second half was good. And now against Sampdoria. Is this a mental thing in your opinion? I mean, first of all, do you think it's a problem, or do you think it's just a coincidence? And if you think it's a problem, is it a mental thing, or is it really the fact that Antonio Conte has run these players to the ground and they're exhausted and so they can't keep up and finish these games off? What are your thoughts, Patrick?
I don't think it's a problem as long as you're getting results. I watched that Coppa Italia semi-final second leg. I couldn't believe Napoli went through to the final. I have to say, Ospina made a string of saves, and Inter a little bit profligate, and our old friend Candreva decides to shoot on sight when he could just square it. All things that you could probably legislate for. I mean, when Candreva gets the ball, and then again he went and surprised me by squaring it to Lukaku, and then Lautaro scored in the Sampdoria game. But one thing at a time. I thought Inter were unlucky to go out to Napoli, I have to say. And then I know a lot of people were saying it was sour grapes for Conte, saying that they deserve to go through. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because people always say, so-and-so deserved to win the game because they had more chances, or they had the better of the play or possession, whatever. Ultimately, the final score, tells a story. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's like a golf score, isn't it? If you manage to get up and down for a par, I've probably just lost everyone with this analogy. But if you manage to get up and down for a par, then no one really cares if you sort of sliced it 100 yards right and then chopped it to 80 yards. If you're able to get up and down, it doesn't really matter. And I think it's the same with results here. So I thought Inter unlucky, but then, Ospina made the saves he made. You could equally say on another day he would probably catch that corner from Eriksen. Maybe it would have been a different game. But I was impressed with Inter against Napoli. I was very impressed with Inter against Sampdoria. And I think if you've got the game won and you're comfortable, I don't necessarily think you need to play at 100 miles an hour for 90 minutes. Lazio last season in particular were known for just turning it on for 45 minutes, but also they didn't have that consistency over 90 minutes. I remember, they've even done it a bit this season as well. I think there was a Lazio-Atalanta. I think they were 3-0 up and got pegged back, or vice versa. Atalanta is similar like that as well. The ability to just turn on the style, blow teams away and score a goal in a sort of glut of goals, and then maybe manage the game. Yes, Sampdoria scored, but I don't think they really ever looked like equalising. There was an effort from Muru from outside the box that you'd expect Handanovic to save if they're on target. And I think Inter have a bigger squad than they had in previous years. They still don't have the biggest squad. Their squad is not to be reckoned with in terms of size and depth compared with Juventus. So if they're able to get the game won in 45 or 60 minutes and then just ease off, and, now would be the time to make those 5 substitutions, actually get the players off the pitch. But if even if you want to make fewer substitutions, you want to make sure you have your best players still on the pitch, then you can manage the game, and you do need to be able to manage the heat. And I really think this tour de force, as they love to call it over here, I think it's going to suit Conte down to the ground. It's like tournament football, and we all remember what happened in Euro 2016. Italy was so close, really.
Will, you have a question for Patrick?
I do, yes. Thanks for joining us, Patrick. I'm disappointed to hear that you weren't in Rome for the final, because I wanted to know what it was like to be in that stadium with the baying virtual crowd jumping up and down in the background. That was the Coca-Cola masses coming in for the match. What an experience that was. No, my question is very much related to what we were just discussing. I think my favourite moment of last night was Christian Eriksen's interview with Inter TV after the match, when he made the mistake of slipping that his Italian was improving. So inevitably they asked him from the studio to give him a phrase, and he just said, "Inter, Scudetto, sì," and then had a little giggle and then went off. But that's basically the crux of the question. This match has put this win, I should say, has brought Inter back to within 6 points of Juventus, although it's kind of 7 because they have the advantage on head-to-head if we end up level on points. Conte seems to really believe that this is possible. He was very bullish in the pre-match. He was very bullish in the post-match. So my question is not so much can Inter compete. in the last 12 games? Because I think everyone would suggest that that's very much possible, especially looking at the calendar. But do you think, in your heart of hearts, that we can actually win it? Because I was looking at the numbers earlier and I was just thinking, oh, this is quite difficult because you need Juventus to drop points in 3 games, you need Lazio to lose twice, and that's assuming that we win every match to the end of the season. So looking at the calendar, looking at everything, do you think this is an actual possibility, or do you think we should be happy just to push them right to the end?
I think it's a 3-horse race. I really do. I know Juventus are one clear. I was looking at it, Inter have a better head-to-head than Lazio, so then you're assuming that both of those sides would overhaul Juventus, because I think I'm right in saying if all 3 teams are level on points, then the whole head-to-head thing negates itself.
Let's not imagine that.
But,
imagine that
you're right. I mean,
no.
But football's not maths, though, is it, Will? Otherwise it's a case of, Juventus only need to win 10 of their remaining 12 matches, and then Inter can't get back into it. But it doesn't really work like that. And I think the games are going to be coming so thick and fast, and almost none of the teams are ever going to be playing at the same time on the same day. So that brings with it whole different dynamics. And then who plays first and when another side plays and who the opposition are, that's all going to come into play. I just think, Inter have a good side on paper. They don't concede many goals. If you can just keep clean sheets, and then nick a goal or 2. I think this is absolutely built for Conte, this challenge. Lazio weren't expected to be in a Scudetto challenge. Now they've got to come back and prove that they're able to pick up where they left off. Juventus have looked wobbly. Admittedly, in that cup semi-final second leg, they didn't need to do anything because Milan, in classic Milan style in recent years, completely imploded, which gave Napoli a much harder job to do, if you ask me, because Juventus didn't get out of second gear and didn't need to do anything in that semi-final second leg. But I was underwhelmed by Juventus the first 30 minutes notwithstanding. So I don't think this is the Juventus side of previous years. I think there's an advantage for Inter in the sense that Sarri is still finding his feet. I don't think he's found the system that suits his team. I don't think he knows what his best 11 is, which is astonishing, really. And I don't know how much longer, this is a risky statement to make, but Ronaldo scored 25 plus goals. I think he's got more than 20 already in Serie A. God, you can tell I've been off for 3 months. My stats are all over the place. I'm just coming out with sort of airy-fairy nonsense remarks, but which bodes well ahead of Verona Napoli tomorrow night. But
everyone tune into the world feed, please.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. After I've already slated the man singing the national anthem, who, by the way, let me just qualify that because you might not edit it out. I don't trust you guys to edit it out. I thought I was very generous after he sang the national anthem because I said I'd just like to say he's a naturalized Italian. Italian is not his first language, so not easy at the best of times to belt it out, especially as it's that whole sort of archaic Italian. I don't even know the words to.
It's a pretty difficult hymn to sing out. It goes on forever, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In an empty stadium as well.
So Sergio, I salute you. Is my second answer. But long story short, I don't see any reason why. I mean, the difficulty is that you've already played Lazio twice and you've already played Juventus twice. Had Inter had a couple of head-to-heads to play. But those can also work against you. Then if you lose those, you're completely out of the title race. In some ways, you just think, can Inter be a flat track bully? Can they beat all the teams in front of them? They should. They can, but this is Inter. And I'm actually doing Parma Inter on Sunday. And as I know from my 18 months at Inter TV, the Tardini is campo ostico. They love to come out with that anyway.
Nice one. I mean, I think Inter have only won like 3 times in their history at the Tardini in the Serie A. It's not a very friendly place for Inter to go. Mo, have you got a question for Patrick?
Yeah, I'm going to preempt your sourpussness about the match by asking Patrick, as a person who interacts with, I guess, a wider swath of Serie A fans in general than most people, do you reckon that Interisti are particularly prone to hyperbole, both negatively and positively? I mean, honestly, the divide of which Anima speaks is really funny because there is a camp that really thinks that not only are we Scudetto challengers but possibly even favorites, and then there's another camp that thinks the sky is falling, has fallen, and Conte is the worst manager in Inter's history and can't manage a squad for 90 minutes, etc., etc. I mean, I've watched quite a few matches post suspension across the various European leagues. And I have to say, all the big teams look rusty. It seems like it's a period that's more difficult than a regular start of a season, for particularly from a player fitness perspective. And I think Inter overall have performed extremely well, all things considered. Is there a reason particular to Interisti why they seem to exaggerate negatives and positives? In particular, is this idiosyncratic to Inter supporters, or is this something that you see across the tifosi of multiple clubs?
I think it's pretty universal, but I think some clubs are more guilty of it than others. Inter are probably top of the class in terms of the sort of schizophrenia in the fan base, and I love it. I think you have those that it happened with Mancini, it happened with Spalletti. Those that you're top of the league after X amount of games. It's like, okay, it's our time. We're gonna win the Scudetto this year, and then others that they'll be 5 points clear with 2 games to go, and they'll say, no, we're definitely going to lose the title. Because that's the history of the club, and they can try and do their marketing campaign to do away with the whole Pazza Inter and try and make it a bit more sober in terms of the tone. But that's God, I'm so cliche tonight, but it's in the DNA of the club. So no, it is true. I think it's true of other fan bases as well. Roma. There is no club that has an ability to self-destruct like Roma, which makes them particularly interesting to cover as well. And yeah, interesting to see what's going on at the moment with the sporting director and all of that. But I think, there's something about Inter there that the fan base are never on the same page. But that's probably true of a lot of big clubs. And I think it would probably be very Inter if they could come back and storm to victory here. And, in some ways there's that, post Calciopoli, you have Juventus fans always questioning how many of those Inter titles were genuine titles because Juventus were weakened by the authorities, leaving aside the fact that they were actually convicted. I know this is very dear to Nima's heart, so I won't get started on Calciopoli. But my feeling is, this is the asterisk season par excellence. This is I'd love to know how, if you had to do a shot for every time you heard the term campionato falsato, how quickly you'd be on the floor drunk. But I think it would be very Lazio or very Inter to win the league and then have it sort of leveled at them for years to come, as if to say, well, that doesn't really count as a title. But then again, Juventus have a false number in their stadium that they're, proud to parade around. So I'm not sure I've even answered your question, Mo. But I do think... No,
you have. I think
there is more schizophrenia in the Inter fan base than elsewhere. And I think it's because Inter want to win the league title every year. Some of the fans think they should win the title every year. The Coppa Italia, whatever you want to say about it, it's been sort of it's a slightly more prized competition ever since Juventus decided to win it 4 years in a row. That's my feeling, certainly in the modern era. But only one team can win the league title. So in some ways, Inter should have tried to win the domestic cup. Not that they didn't, but they would have been better off winning that. And then they're one step closer to winning the league title again. But I think there's that sense of entitlement. And I don't mean that. I know that has a negative connotation. But I think Inter are right to feel that they should be in a challenge for the league title every year, not necessarily always win it. But this 8-year domination that we've seen from Juventus is unprecedented. And it's a pretty damning indictment on Inter and Milan in particular. And I think now the fans have probably just got to the stage where they're just saying enough is enough. And I actually think Conte is the best short to mid-term fit for Inter to get them winning again. I think Spalletti was a good hire. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but I think he got the club back into the Champions League 2 years in a row. Yes, albeit on the final day of the season. But I think the club are definitely going in the right direction. I think they are pushing towards the league title. It might be out of reach this year, but I think that's part and parcel of being a big club. You're always going to have naysayers that say, no, the coach is useless. No, this player is overrated. No, we shouldn't have sold so-and-so. We need to strengthen here. And then there are other fans that are going to be, completely over-enthusiastic or very excitable at the sign of a first victory and be like, we're going to go the whole season unbeaten. So, that's what's great about football, I think.
Alex, did you have a question for Patrick?
Yeah, on the Lautaro Martinez situation, it's been, an interesting saga to follow, especially during the hiatus, because there were all these Spanish reports and all these Italian reports. Now, Patrick, if Barcelona were to make an actual substantial offer, even if it maybe fell a little bit short of the release clause, but they make a substantial offer, do you think that Inter may be right to take the offer, knowing they would get a lot of money, big plusvalenza to reinvest, or should they hold out for the release clause and really hold on to Lautaro at all costs? What do you think would be the better course of action?
I think I just had to mute my microphone there because I've got the latest siren going past. Alex, can I first of all compliment you on your voice? It gets me every time. I would be a lot further along in my commentary career if I had those dulcet tones.
Well, and if I had your knowledge, we could create like a super broadcast.
I have to rely on my content, which has been found a bit wanting tonight. Anyway, I'm going to try and be a bit more precise and specific on this answer. Lautaro Martinez, if I'm right in thinking, he's in August 97, so he's not even 23 yet. And the way he started the season was brilliant. And I haven't seen a player protect the ball that well in I don't know how long. So the ability to bring other players into the game, the ability to win cheap free kicks, but he's just also very technically good. I think he needs to work on his heading. All that being said, the release clause is, remind me, 110 million euros?
111.
111. Oh, okay, there you go. So that's some sort of Nelson or something like that. I'm sorry, another cricket reference. Dreadful. No, the previous one was golf. Sorry. You can tell I've been on the continent too long. 111 million euros. A very good good purchase, with Milito's involvement. I think if you get the release clause, you obviously have to accept the offer, and I think he would go. I think we never know what's going on in the player's mind, but he does seem to be keen on a move. I think it's too early in his career to do that. I don't see why he couldn't go to Barcelona 2 or 3 years from now in his mid-20s and still sort of obtain semi-legendary status at Inter. We've seen with another Argentine that you can score over 100 goals in a pretty short space of time and then, tarnish your reputation. But, that depends on how you go about your departure. I think it would be a shame. I think given Marotta's ability to identify a player, 100 million in sort of transfer receipts, in revenue from a player sale would be pretty handy for Inter, especially if you could get 3 £30 million players or 2.5 £40 million or 2 £50 million players. But how much do you weaken the side? I think Lukaku really thrives playing alongside Lautaro. I know Eriksen has certainly brought another dimension to Lukaku's game as well. I would love to see them again for another 2 seasons before he were to go on. So I think hold out for the release fee is the short answer that I could have probably given there. But if you get 100 million for someone that you paid 25 million for, there or thereabouts, then it's hard to turn down that money, really. But it's tricky because a lot of the financial fair play restrictions are now being relaxed. So ordinarily you'd say this is the way you need to run the club for the foreseeable future, if not for the short term, whilst you're making sure that you're in the Champions League year in, year out, getting that revenue. But Suning have run the club so well financially that I don't think you necessarily need to sell Lautaro for that. But from a business sense, it absolutely would be a sensible decision to sell him. I personally would want to keep him as an observer of the league. And as Inter fans, I'm sure, you'd love to see Lautaro stay there till the age of 30. I think if you can strike a balance whereby, there's all this suggestion these days that players have all the power. That is true to a certain extent, but we've seen in the past, I think about Manchester United. Ronaldo wanted to leave for a year. They managed to convince him to stay for another season. He was brilliant. Rooney was agitating for a move and he stayed. There have been countless examples in the past, not to mention players that sort of mislead the media into thinking that they're going to leave just to get a bigger contract. Maybe Lautaro's doing a Sergio Ramos. I mean, who knows? But I think hold out for the release fee, but also make sure that you've done your homework and got 3 or 4 potential targets lined up. And if you do end up losing him, then make sure you bring in Tonali and whoever the striker of choice would be in terms of that.
I agree with you in terms of, I think 111 million euros would help. I mean, given, like you said, Marotta's track record, it buys a lot of shiny new toys. And Marotta is very good about finding shiny new toys that work together, and so I'm not too fussed, to be honest. I just like the fact that Suning are such play hardball like they do with Man United with the Perisic thing. It's our pride. They'd rather have him on the bench and send him on loan to Bayern Munich than to give him, when they didn't want to sell him, to Man United for a discounted price. And I like that. That's a statement of intent, and it shows power. It shows power, and I like that. I really like that. Right. I wanted to ask you a little bit about what you. There's a lot has been made about Christian Eriksen since he joined. That he needs time to adapt, and now he started to adapt. What is your thoughts? I mean, do you think that this 3-4-1-2 is the way to go, or do you think that maybe Conte can get Eriksen to play in his 3-5-2 as well? What's your thoughts on that?
I think if you play a 3-5-2, it's going to be quite hard to accommodate Eriksen unless you really make sure that he is tactically and defensively disciplined. There's nothing to suggest that he couldn't be, but you maybe take too much out of his game going the other way. Admittedly, Inter were at home. Admittedly, it was against a very poor Sampdoria side. When I saw that Sampdoria starting 11, I was worried for the Blue Cerchiati, I have to say. But I thought Eriksen was great in that free role. And I think in some ways, if you're going to spend 20 million on a player that's 6 months out from the end of contract, then, you're speculating, you're investing a lot of money on that player. And I don't ever believe in this phrase about building the team around someone, but I think if you've got good players, put them in their best position and allow them to thrive and operate, where they can do the most damage. It just happens that Candreva is playing well, and I do think he is playing well. You can question some of his occasional decision-making in the final third, because he is perfect for a wide role. Sort of up and down the flank in terms of his stamina. So I think Eriksen, between the lines, in a free role, able to drift and come short and get the ball off Barella, or pick up a little pocket of space, but just such an intelligent play. I mean, how many players would play that ball back to Lukaku for the 1-2 on that opening goal against Sampdoria? It reminds me of the sort of ability that Guti had at Real Madrid, where it seems like he's about to shoot, and then there's always just think, maybe a nine times out of 10 I'll score here, but I know by passing the ball that we're definitely going to score here. And I just like that unselfish approach. And I think Eriksen has just looked very good in those 2 games that Inter have played since the resumption. I thought he was good in Naples. I thought he was very good against Sampdoria. And I think if he's in the side, play the 3-4-1-2. If you're going to rest him, then by all means revert to the 3-5-2. But systems, a lot of the time, it just, you see the shape and the formation of a team when they're out of possession. So you're probably asking Eriksen to tuck in anyway. So that's probably just contradicted everything I've just said, but 3-4-1-2, 3-5-2 might, in that sense, become much of a muchness. Brozovic has been my favourite Inter player for a number of years now, so I'm very keen to see the whole Brozovic, Barella, Eriksen axis from that perspective, because I think it's very exciting indeed. But a weak Sampdoria team, we have to see against Parma, because I don't think I've seen a Sampdoria side that weak in terms of personnel in a long time. I'm doing them actually away at Roma on Wednesday, and I'm a little bit worried for them there, albeit they'll have played a game more than Roma since the resumption. So it's hard to draw too many conclusions. I think we can almost draw more conclusions from the Napoli game because of stronger opposition, albeit that was the first game back for both sides. So I think we won't know much more about Eriksen until another game or two, but certainly on evidence of Inter Sampdoria, I thought he was the best player on the pitch.
I'm really glad you brought the Brozovic thing up because I saw something. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on question on the Brozovic thing. And this isn't is a Gagliardini better than Brozovic question, because there's no doubt who the better player is. But in terms of roles, do you reckon that the midfield module in the middle, with Eriksen playing in the advanced role and Barella doing his Barella work, is it a better functioning midfield when you have like a head down workhorse kind of player like Gagliardini, or is Brozovic's overall quality a better improvement on the module anyway? What do you reckon is a better trio, central trio for the midfield for Inter? Because I honestly I don't know. Like you say, it's difficult to judge with the Sampdoria game because they're so much weaker than Napoli. But part of me also thinks that maybe we don't need so much creativity in the midfield, and we need someone who's a degree or two more physical and, workhorse like than Brozovic in Gagliardini, or God forbid Vecino, or whoever, in that midfield module.
I would always go with Brozovic, in that he covers more ground than anyone else. His tactical awareness is outstanding. He always seems to know where the ball's going to drop. I've seen countless examples where Inter are out of shape going forward. The opposition are about to break forward, and he either hooks back with a slide challenge, or he's able to sniff out where the ball's going to go to, and he gets there. I think he's a wonderfully intelligent player. And, that's probably Spalletti's biggest contribution as Inter coach, was putting him in that deeper role, because he was frustrating for years and no one really knew where his best position was. So I would think you would always play Brozovic, and I'm not worried about Brozovic in that deep-lying playmaker role. I think Barella has enough about him in terms of his busyness and his energy. Yes, he'll get booked every other game because he still hasn't sort of learnt to tackle. He's a bit sort of Paul Scholes. A lot of Manchester United references tonight. We can get away with that with Alexis Sanchez and Lukaku. I'm coming across as a United fan. I'm a Saints fan. That's dreadful. Anyway, but I think Brozovic has to play in your strongest team, and I think the other two are also pick themselves, and I think that's good for Inter now. It's great when you know that those 11 players are comfortably your best team. I think Bastoni, apart from the odd leggerezza when he takes his eye off the ball, I think he's definitely first choice along with De Vrij. Skriniar would be the one I would occasionally ask questions about, but I thought he played well against Samp. But coming back to it, I think Gagliardini, workhorse, as you said, water carrier, is probably how I would have referred to him. No shame in that. Didier Deschamps was a famous water carrier. Sorry, I've just named a former Juventus player. Anyway, I think Gagliardini is exactly the sort of player that you can play against Sampdoria, that you can play against Spal. He's just the sort of player that you want to pick against a lesser side. He'll come in and he'll do a job. Do you want him playing in the Derby d'Italia? I don't think you do, to be honest. And it brings me back to when I was preparing for the Coppa Italia final. I was looking at the games that Buffon had played in the league, and I think only one of them was against the top 10 side. So Buffon might have had 4 or 5 clean sheets in the league, but it's because Juventus are playing Spal again. I'll come back to them at home, or whoever it may be. And I think Gagliardini is exactly that sort of player. You keep him in the squad. He's going to do a good job as and when he comes in. He's always going to play 10 to 15 league games a season because there'll be injuries and suspensions, or you want to rest him. But I would never pick him above Brozovic, even at the risk of being slightly more attacking than defensive, because I think Brozovic just offers so much when in possession.
But that's what I wanted to say was, I read what I think it was Marco Barzaghi, or was it Matteo Barzaghi? I think it was Marco Barzaghi who said something about maybe Inter is better without Brozovic when they have Eriksen, because Eriksen offers so much more. And when you have Barella or Gagliardini, you have Barella or Sensi, or you have Barella or maybe Tonali, maybe someone like a traditional regista is not needed the same way that Brozovic is. What are your thoughts on that?
That's certainly one way of looking at it. I think you'd need a bit more You'd need a larger sample size to really be able to ascertain whether or not there's any truth in that. I think it would be very hard on the basis of what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 seasons to, certainly last 2.5 seasons, to leave out Brozovic on the basis that tactically he doesn't quite fit. Barella's been very good and proven a really astute signing, and I wasn't 100% sold on him. I liked him at Cagliari, but I didn't know whether he'd be able to make the step up. And he got a lot of yellow cards, and I think he only scored 1 goal last season, whereas he's added that goal threat to his game as well. I think if you do want to have a pure defensive midfielder, if you're a club the size of Inter's, then it can't be Gagliardini. It has to be someone like N'Golo Conte or whoever it may be. It has to be a player of that type that is just there screaming and winning the ball back and then playing it simple, but just offers a bit more than Gagliardini, because he's constantly trying to hit that 50-yard Hollywood ball, and he overhits it by 10 every time straight into the stands. And I can imagine Conte giving him quite short shrift with that. But Gagliardini is exactly the sort of player that Conte can get the best out of. So I would think, if let's see if Inter play all 3 again. If we're assuming that Brozovic will be there every time there's a big game. And as and when Brozovic plays alongside Barella and Eriksen, if things start to break down, then you can start to pinpoint, right, who's doing what wrong? Is Conte struggling to make them fit? Surely the ability of a great coach is to be able to get those 3 very good players and get them to fit together and work together. But Gagliardini does offer that. He's someone exactly where he will be. He's tactically disciplined. He'll keep his shape from that perspective. So maybe the sort of player that you want to bring on if you've got a lead and you want to hold on to it, as opposed to starting a game that you need to, Inter need to be gung-ho now. They need to be attacking teams. They need to try and do, dare I say it, what Atalanta are doing, and score very quickly against teams, get matches won, and then rest up. Because if you're doing that, then you can completely negate the very busy, well, not completely, but you can certainly mitigate for the busy fixture list.
For sure, that's a great point. So I wanted to before we let you go, I'd like to, are you still doing your YouTube channel? I thought I'd give you some space to plug your stuff coming up, because I am.
But thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, it started as a sort of lockdown endeavor to keep me sane, because my work sort of dried up from one day to the next. Oh, woe is me, I'm a freelancer. So I've been reading a lot of that on social media recently, so I won't contribute to that. Thankfully, work has resumed. But I quite enjoyed it. I love the sound of my own voice, in case you couldn't tell. So it's been quite nice to give myself a forum to talk about what I want to do. Now, it was a way of me staying sharp, having not done some on-camera work for a while. And it was my birthday last week, and someone bought me a selfie stick which doubles up into a tripod. So I've now got a 2-camera setup, which I've been experimenting with all afternoon. The irony is I spent all afternoon with that, and the editing has become too complex. And so now it's actually ironically hindered my video making as opposed to helping it. But subscribe, Patrick Kendrick on YouTube. Let's go from 165 subscribers to 167, and it will definitely have been worthwhile. But it's nice to talk about Inter, guys. Yeah,
I have to say, your test you did about transcribing Conte's famous. Conte, was it when he was at was it Siena? He was when he lost his mind.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that really made me laugh, and also I really enjoyed the top club anthem ones.
Yes. Well, yeah. No, there's a little bit of Italian football content in there. I need to stick with that, but I've sort of been staying along the lines of interpreting and commentating for the moment. The former in particular, because a lot of my traction on LinkedIn has come from that. But yeah, I'd be quite up for doing a remake of the rants The problem is Malizani. That's almost. I think I know it word for word. It's a bit like Forrest Gump. I could probably quote it line for line. So I'm going to have to find something. Maybe I'll try that one with Gattuso when he was in Crete or whatever it was. And
Malizani had a few, didn't he? You can just try. He's got.
That's true. And there's also
the one at Genoa where he said the word mollo about 3,000 times.
Well, yeah, and Mollo was in Greece as well. It seems to be a favourite.
It's his catchphrase. Yeah.
And quite a tricky one as well to translate, Will. Do you know what I mean?
It's not a word, is it?
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, that's
not in that context, anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely. And and then there's that Spalletti one in Russia in the mix as well, which is always enjoyable. But so there you go. Yeah. No, there's. I think Stramaccioni might have had one as well. In fact, I'm trying to get hold of Strama because he is Mr. and Nima knows this as well. He is Mr. Coach I've worked alongside, an interpreter par excellence, and he sort of rebranded himself as an English-speaking coach that will go to any outpost, Iran notwithstanding, and have an interpreter alongside him. So I'd really like to get his thoughts on what it's like to be a coach and work alongside an interpreter, because I didn't run into Frank de Boer again, even though I went to Atlanta last year, and unfortunately he was away on pre-season training. But otherwise, I'd have enjoyed a reunion with me old mucker. But I'll let you guys crack on there. This has been another fully professional display from me. So thank God this isn't going out anywhere.
Exactly. We're just keeping it here. No, but thank you so much for coming on. And if people want to follow you on Twitter, it's at Patrick Kendrick, if I'm not mistaken.
With 1K in the middle, yeah. I think
Yes.
Patrick Kendrick with 2 Ks was taken. So it's like Patrick Endrick.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah.
Thanks for coming on, Patrick. It's always a pleasure.
Cheers,
Take
gents.
care.
All the
Ciao.
best.
Buonasera.
Thank you.
Thanks. Right, that was the Patrick Kendrick, and he'll be commentating Inter Parma or Parma Inter this weekend, as he said. I'm going to be looking forward to that. I honestly think that his voice is absolutely not too shabby either. Obviously, Alex does put everyone to shame, but it's always good fun having on. But I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the Sampdoria game, because I don't understand how the hell Inter were suffering in the second half after that first half, and this is what drives me crazy. And I still think that this is not one time. This is a repeated problem with Inter, that under Conte notwithstanding, because I thought this was something that Conte was going to stamp out. This isn't something that started with him, but it is definitely something that is an issue, and it has been for a better part of a decade. And that is this notion that Inter can't finish games off, and it's become like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't know where the psychological effects of this begins and or where it ends, and the actual, whether it's Conte's training regime that causes that their energy levels are exhausted, where that starts. I honestly don't know, and I want to create a little discussion here. I want to hear your thoughts about it. I want to start with you, Alex. Where are you on this? And then I'll hand over to Mo and Will.
It's certainly both, but I think to me, it looks more mental than physical. I'm sure that the physicality, the training regimen, the way Conte demands his players to go, 100 miles per hour at all times, I'm sure does affect them physically. But the reason why I say it looks more mental to me is that it's not just the Samp match. We've seen it, I think, a handful of times. I mean, Nima, you mentioned when you were talking with Patrick about, second halves against Barca and against Borussia Dortmund. We've seen Inter change kind of their form in enough second halves to notice this. And because to me, they obviously early in the second half, they had a great chance to really put the game away, take the 3-0 lead. Eriksen just dished a beautiful pass to Lukaku in the box. And, he didn't really look ready for it. He put it well wide to the right. And then once Samp scored and they made it 2-1, that to me is the exact moment that Inter started to look just disorganized, underwhelming, and that was when I really saw like a switch was flipped, which makes me think it's more mental than it is just physical, and it's really frustrating, right? I mean, you can't take the Pazza out of Pazza Inter, and I really, and I know Conte has said this, so I'm not reinventing the wheel here with this theory. I think a part of it is experience, not to say that every player on the club has been around for 10 years, but when you have a club that, hasn't really won anything in 10 years, I think that's part of the reason why they don't have the type of experience that a Juventus has to close out games, even when they're playing poorly. Inter tends to do the opposite. They find a way to grab defeat from the jaws of victory, and they did win this game. I know that I sound as if I'm depressed. It was 3 points in a victory, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day. But we saw how close they came to throwing this game out the window. And I don't know. To me, I think that once this club shows they can win a trophy and can, get some really important result, I think you might see this mentality get thrown out the window. So I don't really blame it as much on Conte and his physical demands. I probably blame it a little bit more on being the attitude that these players have carried with them even pre-Conte.
That's a good point. Will, where are you on this?
Well, it's clearly both, isn't it? That's the cop-out answer, but there are clearly elements of both. My impression from this season has been that it's been more physical than mental, purely because there've just been so many first halves that have been followed with second halves, which have not been of the same standard, regardless really of the scoreline. I remember the very last match before this lockdown began against Juventus. Inter were very much in the game at half time and never really turned up in the second half. And that wasn't about letting a lead slip or having something to hold on to. That was just an inability to keep their foot on the accelerator. There's no easy answer to it, but I think it's probably both. I hope it's more physical than mental, because if it's still a mental problem after what is it now, 10 years, then and if Conte can't resolve it, then it's going to be very difficult to solve that going forward. But this is clearly, you asked Patrick earlier whether this is a problem or not. It's definitely a problem. Inter have lost 13 points from winning positions this season, which is quite a lot for a team that's trying to win the league. And some of the statistics in the first half were mind-boggling. I was watching the game and there was about half an hour gone, and I was thinking, I don't think Samp have even made it into Inter's box yet. And then at that moment, a stat flashed up that said that Inter had 81% of possession, and that's not after 10 minutes. That's 30 minutes of football. At half time, the passes, and there's another stat I saw, 347 for Inter against 96 for Samp, which is almost 4 times as many. So to not put that game away is really, really pitiful. Samp never made Handanovic make a save. They never actually looked like they were going to score. But the fact is, nobody felt comfortable. I don't think the players were comfortably seeing that out. I don't think it was sort of, gestione, as the Italians like to say. It was just muddling through and hoping that there was going to be, no nasty surprises from a set piece. And when you're playing a team that's as poor as that, you shouldn't really be in the position where you're hoping to get away with it. And that's why, despite the brilliant the brilliant 51 minutes until Samp got that corner, it was probably some of the best football we've seen all season. If you do take the opponent out of it, which obviously is difficult. That's why I actually left this match less confident about our Scudetto chances than I was beforehand. Because if that game becomes difficult after you've completely dominated it from top to bottom, then when are you going to get an easy win with all these games coming thick and fast? So I find it difficult to really envisage a scenario in which this league can be won by Inter, but which is why I asked the question I asked earlier about whether numerically it was possible. But to go back to the initial question, I felt it was more physical than mental, and I think the only way you can get around that is with quality, because that's when you need your players who are good on the ball and who know what to do at all times, which is why I would always pick Brozovic ahead of Gagliardini, for instance, to tie it back into the debate we had earlier. Inter's problem over the last few years is they haven't had enough good players, if you want to put it, in sort of plain English. So that's the way to get around it, because I don't think Conte is suddenly going to start changing the way he plays. His teams are like marching bands. They're not orchestras. They are about rhythm and overpowering opponents. So you've just got to find players that can cope when you're not able to do that for 90 minutes.
Mo? What do you say? Because we got two. I mean, Alex says it's a bit of both, or maybe a little bit more mental. Alex is, I say, Will is a little bit more on the physical side. Where are you?
I'll start by saying I don't think it's as big of a problem as it's made out to be. I think it might have been a big problem earlier in that nasty mid-year spell, but at the moment, honestly, I've watched. I mean, I'm sure we've all watched a lot of games. No team has looked as good as Inter has for any moment, for any extended period of time in the Premier League and the Liga. I haven't seen any of the Bundesliga, but it's a difficult time. It's a difficult time. If we acknowledge that there is a problem, albeit not a very big problem, I would imagine seeing that there's been a lot of clearance within the side, and whoever has remained has been, has bought into Conte's philosophy, and I would reckon that it's a physical thing. It's not a mental thing. I was disappointed at the goal yesterday, but having watched the entire second half, that shot from outside the box was a bit of a scare, but it was very wide. It was a shot. You're expected to have your opponent take a shot or two against you all through at some point in time during the game. It wasn't like before. It's different. I think there's an issue here that we're conflating our feelings about previous versions of Inter, and superimposing them onto this team. And I don't think it's that. The previous Inters, Spalletti's Inters in particular, Mancini's Inter, these Inters would have their knees rattling, would be doing poor decision making. But it wasn't any of that yesterday. For me, at least, in my opinion, there was some poor decision making from Moses when he couldn't pick out Alexis as he was running completely unmarked on the far side, on the left hand side. There was some poor decision making, but it wasn't hapless loss of possession in the midfield. It wasn't deer in headlights. Whenever they get the ball, every single player tries to get rid of the ball because they just can't handle the pressure. It just seemed that the guys were tired and they weren't managing the match physically as they had in the first half. And I think, to Will's point, I think quality is, of course, the antidote to that. Quality through the 90 minutes and quality in output is just as important. Quality in physical output is just as important as quality in technical output. So the squad needs to be looked at. And also, I imagine, having Brozovic and Sensi out injured is a thing. It's a thing. You have two of your best creative midfielders out injured, and you're trying to hold on to the ball, and your only option is Valero. Valero is slow. I mean, it is what it is. But the doomsday, my Twitter feed felt like I thought we had just squandered a 2-goal lead, and we're like trailing 4-2 now at home against Sampdoria.
I know what you mean,
but we weren't.
You're so right about that.
We weren't. We won the game. We won the game quite ably. The overall match, I mean, Will talks about around 80% at the end of the first half in terms of possession. The final match stats is 72% possession for Inter. So even in the second half, we dominated possession by miles, shots on target, the whole thing. It's unfortunate. It really is sad that a momentary lapse leads to a very a meaningless, pointless, completely unnecessary goal to get scored against you. And it's also extremely frustrating that, given the number of chances, especially in the first half, that have been generated, and in the second half, of course. I mean, Alexis alone was quite profligate. It is annoying that it wasn't a 4-1 or a 4-0 end result. But at the end of the day, it was 3 points ably, comfortably, and deservedly won after the 90 minutes. And I'll take that any day.
I mean, for me, I think you all make valid points, and for me, this is where I look at it like this. I think it's I think you're absolutely right, Mo, that we're projecting previous horrors and stuff like that onto this Inter, and I think you're absolutely spot on there. But I do think that what Will is saying is also true. This is a physical issue. I don't know if it's a quality problem. I think it's got to do with Conte and his way of, he cannot adapt into not going 110% at all times.
Yeah.
And that's just who he is. And you know, this is exactly ties back to why I didn't want him in the first place, because I don't think that you can, you know, like when we had Mina Arzuki on, she said, well, if you're going to play like that, it'll take a village. You'll need a village you don't need a squad, you need a village of players. And nobody can do that. Nobody can have 40, 50 players in a squad to play. And that's you know, so I think that what happens is that it's a physical issue, that this is caused by a physical issue, and that can lead to a mental lapse as well, because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that they are that they reach a point after 60 minutes where they're so exhausted that a momentary lapse leads to a goal completely undeserved, like yesterday against Sampdoria. Now, obviously, Inter have won yesterday, and that's great, but I think that's more down to Sampdoria not being really good. And what Will said, well, if we can't win this 3-4-0 and comfortably, when are we going to win 3-4-0 comfortably? Now, obviously, that's a rhetorical question, and we'll, you know, Sassuolo and Parma and all the games coming up will answer that question for us. But this is where I'm a little bit worried, and I think that this is something that where you could have an entire group of new players become almost harmed by. You could create new psychological traumas if this continues to happen. Like Will said, 13 points lost for a team that's in the top. That's quite a lot. You shouldn't be doing that. You know, when you're in the lead, and especially in the Champions League against Borussia Dortmund, 2-0 up, close the game off, can't do it. You know, this is what I mean, and I'm just worried that if this keeps happening, this could lead to another situation of damaged goods, where you have to have someone come in and say, you know what, I can't work with them. These guys are damaged. We need to have an overhaul. Pretty much like Milan have done 7 times in the past 3 years. You know what I mean? And I don't, and I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but you know what I mean? Like, this is the broader point I'm trying to make. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But we do play Sassuolo this Wednesday, and then Parma away on Sunday. And it's, you know, they are awful. Sassuolo are awful. The way that Atalanta completely destroyed them is I mean, I saw that game, and Atalanta are good, and they score 4 goals. That was the 7th time in the Serie A this season they've scored more than 4. They scored 4 goals or more, which is insane in and of itself. But I mean, typically, you know, if Inter played the way they did against Sampdoria, against Sassuolo, they should also be 4-5-0 up. But I don't. But you know, you don't know. We really don't know, because again, against by all rights, the Sampdoria game should have been over after 45 minutes too, and it wasn't. And I'm not going to say I'm worried, because I just have this. If recent events are anything to go by, Sassuolo always overperform. Consigli in their goal always pulls up he channels his inner Lev Yashin. Jeremy Boga is a player that will cause issues in the Serie A because of the characteristics he has. I'm more worried about this game than I am the Parma game. The Parma game I'm not worried about at all. I think Inter will win that pretty comfortably, because Parma are a team that Inter and Conte can easily maneuver out. But the Sassuolo game is a bit of a more bogey team for me. What do you think, Will? Do you agree?
Yes, I agree completely. Sassuolo is the game that I'm more slightly nervous about, if only because of the truly extraordinary, almost unbelievable record that Inter have against Sassuolo in the last 3 or 4 years. I think there's been 1 win in the last 7 or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it's not too far away from that, whatever it is. So yes, that's a little nasty surprise in waiting. 6:30 as well, 7:30 of an earlier game. So the game that doesn't really sort of stand out on the calendar. Everyone just thinks, oh, well, Inter will win that, and then we can watch the big game later on, which is obviously Atalanta-Lazio. So it's got that kind of banana skin feel to it as well. I don't like Sassuolo. I don't think any Inter fan should like Sassuolo. They've caused too much stress and angst over the last 4 or 5 years. So I can't be comfortable with that match. It's less than 72 hours after the match that we're talking about. So if the problem is that you can only play like that for 60 minutes with having had a week beforehand to rest, then what's going to happen when you've got even less time and you don't have the rotation in midfield with Brozovic out, with Sensi out? So this is a trap game. I don't know if the Parma game will be comfortable, but if I'm going to pick the one that I'm more concerned about, it's definitely this one. Not least because, as you said, Sassuolo were taken apart by Atalanta on Sunday. They were very good in the first 15 minutes or so. They could easily have been 2 or 3-0 up themselves, but after that didn't happen, they then disappeared from the pitch. So my translation there is that they are therefore ready and they will be fired up to prepare they'll be fired up to play their next opponents, and it just so happens that we are their next opponents. So isn't that nice?
Isn't that lovely? Mo, what are your thoughts going into Sassuolo and Parma? Do you agree with? Do you share the worries that Will and I have, or where are you?
Look, as Will just said, any God-fearing Inter fan will never be comfortable ahead of a Sassuolo game. It's one of those things. And like you said, Consigli just becomes a man possessed, and it's very frustrating. That said, though, I do believe in the Conte project, and in that the Conte project, Patrick earlier spoke about DNA and Pazza Inter. We'll always be Pazza Inter, but there is a way that this side this season has dealt with the weaker provincial teams, and it's been a more methodical, systematic manner. It's been I think boring at times, but it's been effective. I think this is the way this match is going to be approached. I don't think Conte is going to buy into the whole Sassuolo voodoo jinxie thing. He's not a man who entertains these notions at all. So I agree that it's got all the makings of a banana skin game, but I don't think it's going to be that. I think it's going to be an ugly win, but a win, an important win. And I think hopefully so will the Parma game as well. I think very important 6 points here, especially in light of that Lazio and Atalanta match, and hopefully what goes on with Mihailovic, his premonition and his vow to take points off of Juventus tonight as we record. How that pans out, but we'll see. I think these are going to be extremely important 6 points that work very, very importantly in the project's favor.
I should just say that there was one thing I meant. There's one thing I meant to say when I was talking about Sassuolo before. The reverse fixture was exactly what we were talking about in terms of having a physical drop, because you remember we did score 4 goals in that match. It was 4-1 and it was finished. And then suddenly it wasn't finished. It was 4-3, and we were all preparing to tear our hair out. And I don't think that was a mental drop off. I think Inter had just stopped playing because they were conserving their energy. And suddenly Boga did his thing, and suddenly we were all terrified again. So I suppose you can fit that to whatever theory you already had about physical or mental problems. But I just wanted to share with you that I hated the first match, because I'm sure you will do as well.
Alex, where are you?
That was well said by everyone. I wish I shared all of Mo's optimism, but I tend to agree more with Will's assessment. These next 2 games should be 6 points. It should be 2 victories, but we know with Inter it's often not that easy. I don't think they lose either of these games, but I also don't think they win both of these games. I think they'll draw one of them, and it's more likely to be Sassuolo for the letdown, I think, than Parma, even though I did take some comfort in watching Sassuolo against Atalanta, that they look especially shaky at the back to Sassuolo. So I think Inter is going to score certainly at least once or twice in this game. It's not going to be a clean sheet by any stretch of the imagination. But I know it was a long, long time ago, but that first fixture against Sassuolo is still very fresh in my memory. Inter had what should have been a very comfortable 4-1 lead, but it turned into a 4-3 heart attack type of game down the stretch. just with the physical demands that this schedule is creating, I just think we're in store, I think, for a disappointing result here and there, and we just have to hope that Juventus and Lazio also have a few of those, and they need to have a couple more of those than Inter do, obviously, down the stretch. But yeah, I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if they come away with 2 victories. It would have to be, I think, 2 ugly victories, because I don't see them, taking comfortable 4-0s out of either of these. But yeah, I think that Sassuolo, just given the history, and I know, Nima, it's like you say, and Mo, I shouldn't be living with the past trauma of Inter, but it's hard to really shake some of that lack of confidence I have. So yeah, if you're going to make my predictions official, I think they probably draw with Sassuolo and then beat Parma at the weekend.
That's where I am as well. Speaking of that, speaking of Juve and what they're going to do, guess what? Cristiano Ronaldo scored on a penalty, but it actually was a penalty. No, it actually was a penalty. De Ligt was. I think that. I think
soon to be out of date football news.
No, but like, I mean, it's like, no, I know, but I mean, to me, that's, if you do that to another human being, I think you get like 6 months in prison, let alone a penalty called against you. So let's not go full on like that. But anyway, let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip a piss out of, and criticize someone or something in the world of football heavily, starting with the comical part of things, this week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. William Beckham.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
Yeah, this week's Frog, I suppose, could also be dressed up as a Moggi, but I think because it was more of a facepalm moment than a kind of genuine anger/outrage moment, I think it's okay to class it as a Frog. So I'm giving it to Torino's social media manager, because on Saturday evening they were the first team in action for the return of Serie A against Parma. They also scored the first goal of the post-lockdown era with Nkulu, who scored, and afterwards he obviously took the knee, as footballers around Europe have been doing over the last few days to express their solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. And this is obviously a very easy opportunity to tweet a picture and show your solidarity as a club and set a good example for all your fans. But unfortunately, Torino's picture had a big problem with it, which was that as Nkulu was taking the knee, the notoriously white Andrea Bellotti was stood up in front of him.
It looks so bad.
What actually came out was a sort of what almost looks like a tribute to the 17th century, and an era, sort of an era where slavery was all the rife. And unfortunately, this picture ended up on 2 of Italy's main 3 sports papers the day after. It's not that, surely that. Just crop Bellotti out. It's not.
Well, that's what I was thinking. He was so far away. It would have been so.
He wasn't
easy
blocking
to
him, was he?
No, it was so easy to crop out, and it's like, I mean, let's be honest. Romelu Lukaku's wording of his tweet was not very intelligent either. We know what he meant, but seriously, did you all read it? Did you all see what he said? I can read it.
No, I didn't.
He said. Yeah, he says that this one is for all the people who are fighting for injustice.
I'm with you. Yeah.
I mean, we know what he means, but it's just. But I mean, if we're talking Frogs this week, I mean, for me, it's Juan Jesus and Roma. I don't know if you follow this story, but it is hilarious. Basically, Roma have been doing this thing where they've counted down by a number representing the shirt number of a player, and when it came to number 5, instead of putting Juan Jesus, because I mean 9 was Jack or whatever, and number 5 was Juan Jesus, and they didn't put a picture of him, they put a picture of the entire team, and he comments on this on Instagram and says, look, they won't even show my picture when it's my turn or something like that, something really childish and cringy. Which obviously the Roma fans we've had Juan Jesus, so we know
what it feels like.
We know what it feels like to
support a team that contains Juan Jesus.
Yes. So I mean, so obviously they react the only way they know how and say, please leave. Our club's finances are horrible. And then he replies, and this is a quote: Do you think that my 3 or my 5 bits of cash, will save the club's economy? Have you not had have you not had a class? Have you not been educated in mathematics? And it just goes on and on and on and on, infuriates from there. And he's having these back and forths with fans. It's no wonder that he was Ranocchia's the Frog's friend in that froggy central defense with Vidic. I mean, this was such an epic failure, all of it, and now he's been fined and all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Roma have also suspended our favourite sporting director, Gianluca Petracchi, this week. That was another potential fraud, because you may remember that last summer he was being the hard man in the Dzeko negotiations. He was sitting in Roma's media room saying that Inter are silly, they've got to pay up and they've got to start taking our players seriously, and I'm going to punch you, and etc. and so on. And now he's been suspended. So his decline has been very swift and
Pallotta is all I got to say
unceremonious. Well, yeah, it's not all his fault, is it? But still.
Pallotta is really running that club to the ground. Right, let's move on to something much more negative. This week's Moggi, which is represented by Mr. Alex Donald.
I've been thinking a lot about this one, guys, and to put it simply, this week's Moggi is the year 2020. It was hard for me in light of what's been happening in the world. It was just very hard for me this week to single out any individual or any club. And I wanted to go this week with the year 2020, since we've now finally cleared the hurdle in the last couple of days of Serie A returning, and certainly in many countries, maybe excluding the one I live in, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel with this worldwide pandemic that has made so many ill, has cost us an unfortunate amount of lives, and has created a lot of challenges with people's finances and economies. It's just I've been around for a measly 35 years, but this is something that is certainly. The likes of this has never happened in my lifetime, and you have to go back about a century, to find anyone who's been equipped to deal with something like this. So it's really been a tough few months, and it's been a strange start to the year. So I'm just hoping, guys, that we can get through what's been a Moggi of a year so far in 2020 and finish it out with a full Serie A campaign. We can see all the fixtures. And of course, in the bigger picture, I know that football really pales into comparison in what's been going on. I certainly hope that North America and South America, which are not in the best shape right now, can get through this. But it's just, in thinking about it, I've been thinking about this all day, and it was just tough for me to single out any one person as we usually do with a Moggi, because this has been just such a tough year for so many of us out there, guys.
Oh, for sure. 2020 can really do one. Right, let's move on to something much more positive. This week's Moratti, which is presented by Mr. Positivity himself, Mr. Mohamed Nasser.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of this qualities.
Surprise! I'm also going to want to air some grievances about a Moggi of my own after I do the Moratti. My Moratti this week has honestly been, we've seen a lot of pretty lame in-stadium activations all across Europe to try and fill in the crowd, etc. I have to say the artificial crowd noise in the Premier League has been fantastic on game, etc. But all those fake crowds in La Liga and the banners or the posters, the rollouts that they put over the tribuna in the Premiership have just not been very good and not been very nice. So I'm giving a shout out to Inter's campaign of send your own selfie, and they'll project it during the match in the stadium. I think it's a very nice gesture to get the fans involved. I don't think it affected the overall look. It didn't at all simulate the presence of a crowd at all. But I think it was a very nice gesture to get fans participating in the match day proceedings in a way. So I'm shouting that out. Very, very, in my opinion at least, very nice little gesture. But in terms of Moggi, for if I may, Alex, just zoom in on a particular grievance that I have in this shit show of a year so far. It's been the Serie A broadcaster in the Middle East, beIN
Sports.
Yeah, beIN Sports, who is owned by the Qatari state, and because of a political disagreement between their neighbors, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they've been put under blockade by these countries. Blah blah blah. They don't like each other. Cut to Saudi Arabia because they don't broadcast beIN in Saudi, have decided to create the channel, a pirate channel called Be Out Q, Be Out Qatar, which basically takes the entire stream of beIN and broadcasts it, I think, for free. If not for free, then of course for a fraction of the cost inside Saudi. But that's their own problem. This is a problem between the two of them to sort out. Qatar has been very adamant to bring in all the various leagues around the World Cycling League, the French Alpine Skiing Association, blah, blah, blah. They've been really inundating us with all these letters by all these various federations around the world who condemn the Saudi actions of their piracy and whatever, and they want to take the issue up to the International Court of Justice. It's their fight. It's not my problem. It's their fight. I have no opinion on the matter. I just want to watch football. Yeah. So the problem comes to a head when Qatar gets upset at the Lega Calcio for not condemning Be Out Q and Saudi strongly enough, and then and then B, hosting the Supercoppa in Saudi Arabia this year.
Is this actually happening? Is this actually
No. This is all. This is, I could go on for hours and hours and embellish, but this is the cliff notes. This is the dry. Yeah. No.
Okay.
So come to me finally getting excited about watching some Serie A, some Inter. Finally, I opened my beIN subscription and there's no Inter. There's no match. What's going on? No announcement, but apparently they made an announcement today. Subsequently, all paying fans, who paid close to $400 annually for their subscription. I don't know how many millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people all across the Middle East. Qatar has decided, because the Lega Calcio has not condemned the actions of Saudi Arabia and BRQ sufficiently, they've decided to suspend broadcast of the Serie A all across the Middle East, regardless of what subscription you paid for so far.
Jesus.
So,
Jesus, my God.
I've had to resort to whatever streaming methods, with a stream that, yeah. So
I've heard some people complain that they can't watch it, and I didn't know it was this bad. This is the world.
No, there's no Serie A all across the Middle East. No official Serie A, at least, all across the Middle East.
The petulance of governments turning into 5-year-old kindergarten children is like,
it's embarrassing.
It's really embarrassing. Just whatever happened to behaving like an adult,
or respecting a contractual obligation that you've entered with your customer who's paid for a year subscription in advance. Yeah. This lack of consumer protection is just
unbelievable. Yeah, I had no idea about that. Yeah,
anyway, so sorry about that, guys. Long rant, but it's a very dear an issue that's very near and dear to my heart.
No, but you're right. I mean, a lot of people live in the Middle East and watch. I know that listen to this show and live there, and so I think it's good that you brought this up. This is embarrassing. Jesus. Yeah. Right. Well, that's all we had time for. I'd like to thank Patrick Kendrick and I'd like to thank you, Mo. And I hope to God this sorts itself out, because I mean, this is ridiculous. Thanks for coming on. And as always, Mr. Alex Donald, good to have you back.
Oh, I'm so happy to be back. Thank you all so much.
Mr. William Beckman.
Thank you, Nima. We should just spend a word or two for Mario Corso before we leave, because Inter lost one of their most legendary players this week, who obviously died a few days ago. So I hope that, we send all our condolences to his family. And of course, actually today, as we record today, is a month exactly since we also lost Gigi Simoni. So maybe we could tie those two together and
absolutely
send our best wishes to them in the sky.
Absolutely. And Mario Corso, I mean, I was lucky enough to meet him and interview him, and he's one of the loveliest men, one of the loveliest human beings, one of the most honest and brutally honest people I have ever met in my life. Very, very funny man, a lovely, lovely man, and my condolences to his family and his loved ones. And also, they don't call everybody or anyone God's left foot. He had an absolutely divine left foot. I think, he was a very special character. Sandro Mazzola brilliantly, I think, summed him up by saying that every year Helenio Herrera wanted to sell him, and every year Angelo Moratti convinced Helenio Herrera to keep him and extended his contract. He was a brilliant character, lovely, lovely man. So rest in peace. And before we go, I'd like to do 2 shout-outs. We did an interview with the latest signing, Inter's newest signing, Georgios Vagianidis on SempreInter.com. Go check that out. And also, we've released our app, which is 100% ad-free. You can get that depending on where you live, but it'll cost it's a premium app. It's 100% ad-free, no banners, no nothing. £3 per month or €3 per month, or $19.99. Depending on where you live. So go check that out. As always, thank you for joining us this week. My name is Nima Tavallo-Ruzzari, wishing you all 6 points, good week, and sempre e solo Forza Inter.